quite ambitious. We were at less than 1% when this was set a couple of years ago, and the target for 2020 is 10%, and I'll say a little bit more about that shortly. We wanted 25 and 15. We even brought Harrison Ford along to help us campaign for it, but we only got 17 and 10, but it was better than nothing. I just want to highlight the critical importance of protected areas. They're simply the most important tool we have for achieving both biodiversity conservation and ensuring the continued flow of ecosystem services, and they have to be seen as a key element in achieving sustainable development. Now, GEF has really done a great job with protected areas. I think about 60% of your biodiversity investments, close to it, have been in protected areas. But they focus strongly on sustainability of existing protected areas, which is great. It's very important. A little bit less on creating new ones. Perhaps in the years to come, under your leadership, there can be a bit more focus also on creating new protected areas, especially in the KBAs and the AZE sites where the greatest risk exists. Madagascar, one of the examples that have received support from the GEF. This is former President Mark Ravalomanana, who in 2003 at the World Parks Congress in Durban made the historic announcement he wanted to triple protected area coverage, which was great. That process started right away. Unfortunately, in 2009, he got kicked out by this young man, Andry Rajoelina, and he is still in place, but no country on earth recognizes his government. So we've had a real challenge now for the past 3 years in Madagascar. Nonetheless, when Ravalomanana made that historic declaration, he requested $50 million in support to create a trust fund. This is in 2003. Thanks to the GEF, we've now achieved that goal. GEF has made at least a $10 million contribution, and many of our other organizations have contributed to this as well. And this process of creation of new protected areas, in spite of the non-existence of the government, in spite of the fact that some of the protected areas have been invaded for illegal logging, this process continues, and as soon as we have a real government in place, I think we're going to see significant progress. But it could be a year or two still before that happens. $46 million for this extremely ambitious project of creation of protected areas in the Brazilian Amazon, spearheaded by WWF and a number of other partner organizations. Coral Triangle, you've heard a fair amount about the Coral Triangle in this meeting. $63 million from the GEF, fantastic support. And now we have even bigger opportunities in the marine realm, and particularly I think some of you have already heard about this Pacific Oceanscape. There was just a meeting of Pacific leaders a few weeks ago, not even a few weeks, more like a few days ago, coming together and looking at this phenomenal region of about 40 million square kilometers, unbelievable area, that, and they're starting to create protected areas, marine protected areas larger than most countries. This started with the Phoenix Island protected area and the Micronesia Challenge a few years ago. Phoenix Islands is about 400,000 square kilometers. It's about the size of California, almost the size of France. Not to be outdone, Cook Islands just a few days ago declared a 1.2 million square kilometer protected area, which is 3 Californias, but not quite 3 times the size of France, but pretty big. And that was the biggest protected area on Earth until the New Caledonia. The government of New Caledonia created a 1.4 million square kilometer marine protected area. This is unbelievable stuff. And it's all part of this big ocean network that was developed a few years ago and is actually enabling us to achieve that 10% target quicker than I think any of us actually expected. That Mark Spaulding from the Nature Conservancy was giving a presentation today, and he said that with these new areas, we may be up to 3.7% already. That's pretty good, considering 2 years ago we were at less than 1%. Now we also have this global partnership for oceans with the World Bank, Nature Conservancy, CI, and several other organizations. And we hope that we'll be able to create some significant funding to actually implement these very, very ambitious protected areas. GEF also has done a lot of work on mainstreaming biodiversity. I think about 30% of the funding has gone into this issue. Basically what happens in broader landscapes outside protected areas that can make the matrix outside protected areas more biodiversity friendly and ensure the continued generation of ecosystem services. I know one very interesting project dealing with this was on cocoa. And any of you who know anything about cocoa realize that in many parts of the world, particularly in places like Brazil, it's grown in a situation called cabruca, where you have parts of the natural forest remaining for shade. And some of these cabruca forests have diversity of species like this little golden-headed lion tamarin in southern Bahia, as high as or higher than in some of the primary forest areas. This project was $5 million, mobilizing an additional $15 million. 10 countries, almost all of them in hotspot and wilderness areas, and it will produce 10% of the world's cocoa, put it into sustainable production. Very exciting. Biosafety, just a few words about this. This is something that the GEF has done a little bit with, but could do a bit more. This is controlling invasive species. There are many aspects to this, but control of invasive species is particularly important, especially on islands which are heavily impacted by invasive species. And lastly, biodiversity conservation, the GEF, and civil society. Unlike many other sectors, a lot of the action in biodiversity conservation is at the local level by civil society organizations, very often by small to medium-sized national or local NGOs, some of which are represented in this room here. I know Biodiversity is here from Brazil, an excellent example of one of these organizations. But now, it's not the mandate of the GEF to mostly giving the money to governments, but in point of fact, they have done, and I hope will continue to put money into some of these creative mechanisms to get funds into the hands of civil society. I'm going to mention a couple of them here. These are some examples of the critical importance of working with local communities. In Madagascar now, the only action, because the government is non-existent and pretty corrupt, the only real action is at the local community level, and that continues to work in spite of the political crisis. The Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund, which unfortunately has an event at exactly the same time as ours, has been a great mechanism created about 11 years ago with the World Bank, GEF, MacArthur Foundation, CI, and the government of Japan, thank you, Tomoko, one of the founders of this, and the government of France, putting in about $5 million a year each for the better part of the last decade. And some amazing accomplishments, $142 million granted, 12 million hectares protected, over 1,600 civil society groups involved, engaged in conservation activities. This is just showing where these different projects have taken place, and you can see it corresponds almost perfectly to the hotspots. The SOS, the Save Our Species Fund, which was launched in Nagoya by the president of the World Bank, by your predecessor, Monique Barou, and by Julia in an event there. And this has already put several $1 million into critically important species conservation projects. So we're very pleased that you have these mechanisms. We hope we'll be able to continue with them and expand them in the future. And the very last thing is the GEF is looking at new implementing agencies, accrediting other international and national organizations, including NGOs, as implementing agencies of the GEF, and I know that the IUCN is one of those under consideration. So thank you for that as well. And I think I've just about run out of my available time. I would just like to again recognize you. It's the first time I met you back in December in Abu Dhabi. And just want to repeat how excited we are, how delighted we are that you're now the head of this very important mechanism, and we look forward to working closely with you as well as we hope to do with Braulio in the hopefully many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Russ. So I'll spend about 5 minutes at the most explaining to you how we currently implement the GEF biodiversity strategy, and then we're going to open up for questions and for an iterative session here so we can get some ideas from you if I can get the presentation up. Christian? That's not it? Well, I'm going to start so that we don't lose a lot of time. So the GEF, obviously, is the financial mechanism of the CBD. It was created in 1992 to do just that. And one of the interesting features of the GEF is that it's supposed to generate global environmental benefits that go above and beyond the national benefits that are accrued by investments made by governments and by other donors. So we come in to provide that additionality, that additional resource that will make conservation happen. No, that's not it. through a commonly agreed negotiation with the governments and with the GEF. We prioritized according to the guidance by the CBD, and again we take guidance at every COP of the CBD on what we should be taking into consideration, and this is particularly important when we are about to develop a new strategy for a replenishment period, which is the case that of the COP that's coming up in India. And we have 5 major objectives in the biodiversity strategy. The first one, as Russ mentioned, is protected areas, and 60% of all protected areas, 60% of all resources have gone to protected areas. Then is mainstreaming biodiversity into protected landscapes, which equates more or less with the sustainable use objective of the CBD. Maybe you should try to quit this, it's distracting, and I'll finish this. And finally, we have 3 not less important objectives, but ones that are not financially that costly. Oh, here it is. So we've gone through this already. And I'd like to just make a pause, and Russ already showed some of these figures, but one of the things that I'd like to highlight in the accomplishment of the GEF, sometimes people comment with very good reasons that there's not enough money in the system. Actually, there isn't enough money in the system, but with the money that's available and has become available to GEF over the past 20 years, much has been accomplished by governments, by the agencies such as the World Bank, the UNDP, that had, I think, the largest lion's share of the activity in protected areas, for example. And if you look at some of these numbers, 2,300 protected areas, and 634 million hectares of new protected areas being affected by GEF investments. And I was looking at the figures that UNDP is now playing around with for the assessment of the cost of achieving the HE targets. And I believe that to achieve 17% of terrestrial areas, you need to create an additional 500 billion hectares in new protected areas. So this was accomplished over 20 years, and we have about 8 years to do it. But I think that because of this, we can actually have hope that we can achieve the 17% target, because we have done that over, of course, a larger period of time, but there's no reason with a little bit more resource and a little more focus that we can achieve that. Naoko mentioned the importance, the pioneering role of GEF in creating innovative financial instruments such as conservation trust funds, and also our work in the larger landscapes with 265 million hectares. All protected landscapes haven't benefited from GEF investments. Again, as I said, the GEF provides for the incremental costs of achieving global benefits in biodiversity. You have to go because it's not working. And the 5 objectives, as I mentioned, protected areas, number 1. The second is working at the larger landscape. The third is building capacity to implement the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety, and we have a lot of work done already in this area. The fourth is building capacity to countries on access and benefit sharing. This is the one that we are having a little bit of difficulty to get going, because countries, for the most part, do not have frameworks in place. They need some hand-holding, and this is the thing that we are working currently with the CBD Secretary to try to get more resources to not only start doing some pilot projects, but also speed up the ratification process so that the protocol can become effective and we can actually test this great expected potential of ABS to add economic value to biodiversity and return benefits to local communities that conserve and manage these resources. And finally, and not less important, is, can you bring back, is what we do with the CBD on national reporting, and more recently on the revision of the biodiversity plans at the national level, in particular making countries revise them in light of the HE targets, because what we want is actually implementation at the national level, and so this work is takes particular relevance, and we need to do this right away because we only have 8 years to get to the targets, and the sooner that we get this going, the better. Next. For the first time, the strategy of the GEF addresses drivers of biodiversity loss, and this is sort of matches what we have in terms of why we do protected area to arrest habitat change, habitat loss, which is responsible for 80% of threatened species, mainstreaming biodiversity in the larger landscape in support of existing protected area, but also making sure that there is genetic flow, that there is more possibility that the investments in the protected areas themselves have a future. Of course, biosafety, ABS, and enabling activities. Next. I would like to just say very quickly, Russ mentioned the need that we have to prioritize. And actually, what we're trying to do with protected area systems at the national level is to create and enhance them, increasing their representation, both in terms of biomes, species, and so forth. And I've done an analysis of this recently, and it shows that how many megadiverse countries recognize now? 17? 18. All of 18 are among the 20 highest recipients of GEF resources according to this mechanism of distributed resources, this assistance for allocation of resources to countries. So the match is precisely that, and if you do the analysis for hotspots and high biodiversity wilderness areas, you'll find it's the same thing. So this is what we're trying to do. Next. So let's move because Christian. Well, it doesn't matter. You know what the strategy is now, and don't not worry about it anymore, and it's taking a lot of time. I would like now to open up. Russ, can you stay 5 minutes? I know that they won't be late, so if you can take a couple of questions. Hold it. So thank you very much, and I would like to open up now for any questions. If we can direct them to Russ initially, it would be great because he has to leave to open up another event next door, and then we can also start a dialogue with Naomi. Any questions, please? Remarks? Robert, maybe? Oh, yeah. Kathy McKinnon in the back.
Hi, I'm Kathy McKinnon. I used to be a lead biodiversity specialist at the World Bank, and so I'm very familiar with GEF. But I wanted to ask Russ, I'm one of the vice chairs of the World Commission on Protected Areas, and I know he and Gustavo agree with me that protected areas are the cornerstones of biodiversity conservation. But as a conservation community, we've been pretty bad at marketing this idea to policymakers and other players. And I wonder if you have suggestions on how we might do that.
I don't think I need it. I think that this whole ecosystem service approach, green economies, has given us the perfect entree, because in the past, protected areas were seen as this thing that's kind of apart, a little bit elitist, and now it's becoming more and more obvious that they're essential, not just for biodiversity, but they're the essential components of green economy. Because if you don't have, take a place like Madagascar, 90% gone. You're not getting a whole lot of ecosystem services out of those eroded landscapes. You don't protect those remaining natural forest areas, no more ecosystem services, sorry. So I think this mechanism is actually helping us, and this whole process of natural capital accounting, I think is an essential component in the fact that it came out fairly strongly from Rio, although it got buried in the general noise around system meeting. I think this is really a great boon for us. All right.
Thanks, Russell, Naoko, and Gustavo for the presentations and the ideas. And sadly, we need a lot of good ideas, and certainly we need priorities. I fully agree with you, Russell. There's so much that we need to do, and I think we have to be very catalytic. I think we have to strengthen partnerships and have very clear idea about what matters most, and see how more effective we can be. So my priority at the CBG is just one: implementation. So I think we've made good progress at the international arena to make political agreement among countries. So we have a common agenda, a common global agenda for biodiversity. There's no need for more negotiations on it, right? What we need is more work on the ground to be more effective. So I think what we need is how we can mobilize the GEF as a critical mechanism to enhance more leverage of funding from all different kinds of sources, from the private sector, from ODAs, from development banks, from the development sectors in each of our countries, which needs to contribute more for their share of responsibility. So that's what I think we're needing. So I would like to see the opportunity under your leadership now to see how we can be even more effective. I think we've all recognized the good things that we have done so far, but frankly, we all agree that we haven't done enough. That's the problem. The issue, the challenge is bigger than what we have been able to accomplish so far. So just continue to do a little more of what we have been doing would not suffice. So how do we make that jump? How do we upscale what needs to be done? That's the big challenge. I don't have the answer, but I want to partner with all of you to see how we can do that.